it. You bet. I'm gonna go with gallery
Okay,
view
so
anyways.
the way to if I go and I try to add text into the notes, it asks me to sign in via the data tracker. So I think that's
okay.
Now.
So you can view it better. Yeah, I was actually wondering if people would be able to join without a data tracker account. I mean, it asked me to log in.
It looks like you can do read only.
Oh, but no, I mean the interim. I guess for tabs it doesn't apply because everybody has a data tracker account and everybody is sort of experienced. But
Yeah.
I guess for some working groups it wouldn't work, right? Because maybe you want people in there who don't have a data tracker account.
That is probably true.
And that is a whole thing, as we have learned with ANRW.
Oh, yeah. So now there's all these other people who are listed in the participants, but they...
Yeah, those are
they like left over
users.
from past meetings?
Except maybe Tom. I'm not sure. Tom might actually have joined. Oh, and I see Brian. But there's a couple of Jabber users that basically just hang out in our Jabber room forever.
Lurking.
And yeah, lurking.
Brian's not lurking.
No, Brian is here.
Brian is here.
And,
hello.
Yeah.
And what happened to Zod? Zod, did you turn your camera off? Is that why I don't see you?
I think you auto turn off camera, right? Like, so this is Meet Echo. The chairs are supposed to, like, you know, keep very strict control over who can send video and who can talk.
Oh, screw that. I mean, is there a cost? I mean, it's not. I can't see any incentive in doing that.
Well, the cost right now is about 800 kilobits per second, so it's about 200 something kilobits per second per person. You know, if you see the cost in the screen, which is pretty cool.
You can see and hear me now, I guess.
Now I can see you. Yes, I can see you have a guitar on your wall. I think that's like standard issue for anybody in networking or computer science, is that they have to have an instrument like close at hand. You can't see my drums, but they're around the corner.
I had to scoot out of the way so this shows up.
I need to get an instrument, I guess.
Okay.
Ooh,
you have a real one.
I can get an instrument.
And Brian, you have electronic music equipment.
Yes.
Nice.
In fact, I think
there is no like blurring function in Mythical.
Oh, I don't have a camera.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, everybody is welcome to get on camera and unmute without using the Q feature.
And poor Martin is in an actual office.
Oh.
That stick back. That's got it all.
There we go. Yes, but you don't have your set in your kit set up in your office, Michael?
I'm not in my office.
Not in your office.
Poor Martin wants to be in an actual office.
I was actually going to go to the office. I would have joined with a really fun background today, but then I ended up not going to the office that early.
So there's no separate blue sheet feature, right? We still want to keep track of names in the notes?
I think they do blue sheets automatically with
Oh, really?
Echo.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, at least that's how it works at the Ietf meeting. I would assume that interim meetings work the same.
I must have missed that feature.
So yeah, I think it gives the record.
And how does one obtain the record?
Yeah. And it also means that I don't actually have to spam the notes pad to everybody because people don't have to sign in.
I believe the blue sheets will appear magically in the data tracker.
Oh, nice.
The miracles of now there's an echo. Miracles of
technology. Yeah.
So if I'm standing.
Oh yeah, and just in case people haven't seen it, there is a gallery view on the top right, second button, which says gallery view, and you actually get the
this actually looks
gallery
mostly
view.
like A.
And it works with the microphone better than WebEx does, right?
Yeah.
It does better than
the gallery
WebEx.
view.
I'm actually
Yeah, I was
surprised that
gonna.
we're talking so much about this thing. We have survived one whole Ietf meeting using this tool.
Yeah, but I don't think I have actually ever used the gallery view in Mideco.
Yeah, it
Yeah, I
seems
mean, we
new
had
to
a much
me.
more of a sort of a linear agenda presentations at the
Yeah.
meeting, and so the kind of the way we've been using WebEx for the interims is a little bit different. It's cool, although it doesn't. Oh, I see the names. You have to hover to see the names for the pictures. So that's. I think the video quality is really good. I'm impressed. Now,
Yeah.
of course, we're going to get pushed to do this all in Gather, right? So we got to make our avatars, and you know, everybody's got to get their 8-bit skills going.
I don't know. Maybe we can start with a virtual taps, whatever, coffee chat or something in Gather. Not an interim, but I don't know. Push people to use Gather.
You can have fun making it work as a hybrid meeting with some people in person and some online next. That'll be the next
So
fun
our
experience.
So our first agenda item is actually Martin demoing his code. Brian, I'm not sure if you were going to drive the GitHub, but that would be
Yeah, I was going to try.
after.
I was actually, I was mainly just going to see if I could drive the GitHub without like doing.
Yeah, that's definitely,
Yes.
let's try that.
So I am not on my corp machine right now, which means I am, allowed by security to drive the GitHub. But I wanted to see if there was a way that I could point it at a window as opposed to the full screen. But we'll have Martin go
Okay,
first.
let's see. Haha. Okay, but now I'm not sure if it switches you to presentation view automatically, but
It does.
Martin is just starting a screen share. Okay.
But still, you see
Yes,
more
it says it's
than
being started.
we saw in WebEx. So that's
Oh, here we go.
Okay, is that legible to people?
It's a little small, but it's fine for me.
fine for me
Make things
too.
a little bigger.
Martin,
Maybe
that's
that helps.
it's still a small
Yeah.
for me.
You guys need bigger monitors. This is the problem with being at the office. Is like I have this giant screen, and so.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, everyone. So you guys probably remember me talking about both transport discovery and threatening that I was trying to write some code. And I've now done a little bit of that. So to remind people, so I sent out a pointer to the list. It's now up on the F5 GitHub under an Apache license. This effort has two purposes, two main purposes. One is to help build a Linux ecosystem for Taps by, I mean, it's nowhere near ready to do that, but eventually to build this up to a thing where people might actually use it and put it on their boxes and their Linux servers and whatnot, and start using it. And then the second thing was to exercise some of the ideas in transport discovery in that draft. So let's see. Probably the best way to show you is just this is a sample program I wrote. This is just an echo server. So you telnet into it and you type stuff and it sends it back to you. It's a very common toy program, of course. Just give you a sense of what a program would look like using this interface. There are a bunch of callbacks for every event here. So that's what you see here. So here's the one when you get a new connection from a listener. It then initiates a receive, and then the other one, interesting, is see when we receive some data, it will then, you can see there in line 119, it sends that, and then it starts receiving it again. So you guys obviously are familiar with the interface. That's what it looks like, and then the main program is here. It initializes an endpoint. It sets some transport properties, and then let's see, then it frees all the pre-connection stuff it doesn't need anymore, and then it just sits around and waits until you terminate the program, like most listeners. So I've already compiled that, and so if you just run the program, there's a ton of debugging here, which you guys might find somewhat interesting. And so now if I do stuff, it echoes it, and I'm putting in a ton of, so you can see sort of the debugging stack here. So what you can see, and this kind of ties into transport discovery stuff, this is sort of the protocol level, and then there's a TAPS level, and I don't actually print out function traces for the, oh, there it is. No, I do actually, my mistake. So and then of course there's the application level. So it's running up and down through the stack each time. Let's see, oops. So that's what there is with that. The last thing I'll show you about the TAPS interface, the TAPS application interface, because you guys, this is not necessarily all that new revolutionary, this is kind of what the include looks like. Again, this is all written in vanilla C. So there's a bunch of callback function pointers. And then because this is pure vanilla C, there's sort of a manual object-oriented interface where like you have a handle that you pass to TAPS for whatever object you're looking at. So there's the endpoint stuff, there's transport property stuff, and you'll see that really there's very few things that work right now completely, but the listener works. Pre-connection stuff, listener stuff, message stuff, connection stuff. All right, so that's that. By the way, here's the GitHub, just so you can see that it exists. There are some unit tests. There's that one example. There's a few markdown things on how you would build a protocol or an application for this, and then of course the source code. Okay, so now on the transport discovery side, what I've done is essentially written a wrapper for TCP sockets. And you can think of that as a prototype for how any one of these wrappers would work. You could also have a native protocol implementation that did the TAP stuff, but in the near term, we'll probably be doing these wrappers. And part of what this thing does is it's got, if there was an installer, we'd create a YAML file that looks exactly like this. The UDP code doesn't actually exist yet, so so if you ask for those properties, things will go very badly. But essentially, it's describing what is the protocol, what properties does it provide, and where can I find the dynamic library for this this library for that protocol. And so TAPS will then read that in, and then that dynamic library has to conform to a certain certain template in terms of callbacks that it accepts, and some of the basic function calls. So you see listen, stop, send, and receive, which is all implemented at this time. And then of course there's and then this is the actual wrapper of TCP sockets that handles all that. So I would say the only thing I'd say about this implementation, it does make an effort to be portable and scalable. Like it does use libevent, which, as I understand it, I'm not an expert on libevent, but it's a relatively portable means of eventing. You don't have to use libevent in your application or in your protocol, but TAPS itself uses that or assumes that, and it's going to have some ways. It'll be more efficient if you use that. Or there's certainly some things that there's certainly the flexibility if your protocol uses something else to use that instead in the model. And then there's there's things like it takes IOVX if you want to use them for zero copy and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of stubs. There's a lot that hasn't been done for sure on both ends. In particular, the one piece of the architecture that is really missing is there should be a TAPS D that is reading these YAML files and loading all the protocol information in shared memory. But right now I'm doing that on the pre-connection, which is probably not the best thing to do computationally. That's probably the biggest architectural piece that is missing. But other than that, all the pieces are here. It really needs to be enriched. So certainly I would welcome really anything at this point, from like, your syntax is all wrong and you should use a different thing there, to like code contributions or feature adds or bug fixes, etc. So that's that. I'm happy to take any questions about this.
So, Martin, did you, maybe I faded and you mentioned this, did you implement any kind of end-to-end verification that that the selected protocol works? You know, the somewhere between probing and racing?
No, I was kind of right. So when I started this, I was being really ambitious with the pre-connection because obviously that's where all the transport discovery stuff lives. And then I decided to get something that would work quickly. So I stopped that. I kind of commented out a lot of that and just built a listener just so there would be something. So right now it is actually it's going through the list of protocols, which is pretty small, but all the stuff exists to like look at the properties that are requested, look at the properties that are presented, and then kind of take a score for that. And then it's ignoring that score and just picking the first one right now. But there's some stuff there. I think ultimately this TAPS D thing, one reason it should be a daemon is that's where all the security stuff would live to verify that these things work. You could even sort of test the library output at a maximum and like verify the claims of the protocol. That would be a useful thing that I've not even started to think about coding, but it would be a neat thing to do. Does that answer your question?
It's just the high level question of did you implement it? But I'm not sure that you fully understood the question that, you know, when we chartered TAPS, the sort of the big sort of researchy area in my mind was around, you know, how do you select if you've got multiple protocols that can work? And so there's a the probing and racing piece, and that there was going to be some logical, and I expected that there was going to be some you know, experimentation needed to sort of figure out on what kind of heuristics do you use to verify that something is working. How long do you wait before you select the winner in a race? That kind of stuff. And
I see. Okay, yeah. So
you thought of the hook to allow that kind of functionality to be added.
So there are some hooks for racing. It does not currently race. The thing that is most developed in this code is an effort to sort of score the various implementations against the requested properties. A lot of that machinery is there. It's currently being ignored, but that is there. And yeah, I mean, the intent is eventually to implement racing, but it's not. That doesn't really exist right now.
Hi, Martin.
Hello.
Hi. Do you have any applications in mind while you're developing this?
No.
I
So
think it would probably really help the implementation if you had just something slightly more than a test workload to work with. So you're hitting reality more often.
Yeah, that would be nice. So my corporate justification for working on this is that I think we believe that it would be good for the ecosystem, for our applications to have these to make things more platform agnostic. So it is not so much that we are pushing a particular application as just the idea that this would be present, that if this was attractive enough to exist on most Linux boxes, that would be good for us. I could look at something like Nginx, but that is very complicated. And I don't think we're ready at this point to go there. But that actually is good advice. And once this is in a little bit less rickety, it's certainly something that maybe that would be a good target to go to.
Is there an H3? And probably the answer here is no. Is there an H3 server that is not extremely complicated?
Yeah, all the libraries have client servers, so it wouldn't be too hard to port quickly to something like this, because quickly just like hands out the socket. So if you can deal with like the TAP side of things, so you could probably look at some of the quick implementations in C. I mean, there's like 5 or 6. You could probably do a quick survey and figure out which one is the thinnest. But you need to implement the UDP stuff first.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I think there's some delay here. I've had students just playing with these things, just implementing a trivial HTTP 1.1 or even HTTP 1.0 on top of it brings out a few issues. And doing racing v4, v6, possibly HTTPS.
An interesting use might be, if we ever see things like UDP being blocked as a security measure of having something that detects that and fails over to TCP. So now you're using like really widely available protocols and just looking for, does it work end to end?
Yeah, I mean, so certainly there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. I know there are other TAPS implementations out there, that will probably be more nimble than what is going on here. But my hope is to have, number one, like realize the transport discovery stuff, and number two, again, build something that maybe is the root of something that would be production quality at some point. There's a lot of work to do just to get this up to a minimum level of functionality, which we are not really at yet. And that has to be the priority. But and I also would really like to wrap open SSL in particular for various reasons. But obviously contributions are welcome, and kind of suggested steering directions are welcome. And I think as a longer term goal, Tom's suggestion of having a target application, real application, is quite attractive. Regarding quick implementations, I'm not really 100% sure if people are suggesting that we run the quick application on top of this, or we put it underneath. We build a wrapper for it to be like an available protocol,
Why not both?
or maybe both. Why not both? Yeah, well, it's nothing but time. So yeah, I mean, ideally we do both. I would hope that this, as this picked up, like if it did really take off a little bit, then people would be motivated to wrap various things. And I've tried to make it easy. Like, this has obviously been written with an eye towards making it clean for a protocol developer to plug into this architecture without having to do major surgery to their software. And like I said, if people are interested, can look at the Markdown docs to kind of see what that looks like, and look at the TCP implementation or wrapper, such as it is, to get a sense of how what that might look like. And I think I'm over time, so I'm happy to take other questions, and certainly email if people want to get involved in this. Thank you.
Before we move on completely, Martin, how did you find the usefulness of the implementation document? Was it helpful for you?
Yeah, so actually you raised kind of like the third thing that was out of this, was kind of an effort to implement the docs as they are from scratch. I mostly use the API draft, the interface draft. That was by far the most useful to me. The implementation draft was most useful for trying to figure out all the pre-connection and racing stuff. At least that's where I went to try to figure out how to do it. I mean, I put that work on hold, so there's that. I found it kind of confusing and a little heavyweight. Frankly, I think I found some comments in this area. There was already an issue to this effect, but I was kind of the thing that kind of surprised me when on this implementation effort, I didn't appreciate it until I started writing code, was how little the pre-connection does. Like it's basically just this thing. It's just basically a container for a bunch of other data structures, and like I had it in my head that like the protocol selection happened as soon as you did the pre-connection, but it really doesn't. Like you can filter some out, but then you do it again when you actually start the connection, and or the listener. And that was I didn't appreciate that until I read the thing really carefully and kind of worked out the problem in code. So there were a couple of issues filed in that space. That was kind of the main thing. And I've actually still wrestled a little bit with like the notion of adapting TCP to this notion of the message construct in TAPS. And there's not, like, if you look at TAPS interface, there's not really this notion of having just sending a buffer and loading it and just getting what you get. And I've like read it a couple times, and I think I've sort of gotten it right, although I haven't completely implemented a lot of the EOM stuff and all that because it's not really necessary for what I have. But it's not like 100% clear how those things map, and I think I understand now where like there's a message context which is constant, but that that like the actual buffer, the message data changes each receive partial. That's still very kind of not clean, and I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to do that properly once the machinery exists.
Yeah, I think that's one of the areas where it would be useful to get implementations in different languages. So I wonder how cleanly it all maps to the different ways of implementing it, programming it. So I think also I think we had a bunch of perhaps different views coming in, and we're trying to sort of tie them together. So.
I'm a giant fan of the fact you did this in C, because we were like, the API definition is as non-C-like as it can possibly be, in part because a lot of the initial work in this space was, hey, look, we think that networking is held back by the fact that the TCP stack is basically an interface designed to move a tape across a room in C, right? And so like we tried to go as far as we could in the other direction just to make sure we weren't stuck in the, and it is interesting to see that you are, I mean, of course you can implement it in C, obviously, but it's interesting to see how you implement it in C, and that it's actually, it doesn't look that much dirtier than any, ooh, I'm in C and I need object-oriented concepts sort of thing, right? So
yeah, yeah. So like there are many reasons for doing it in C. Our data plane is in C, and so I'm used to trying to pound object-oriented pegs into non-object-oriented holes. But I mean, yeah. So like obviously it's kind of like the base thing to have. It's sort of like the most fundamental thing to do. It allows there's some performance advantages, of course. You can always build stuff on top of it that's a little more user friendly. And then lastly, I have a not well developed idea that like in the very, very long run, this might become a thing in the kernel, in which case doing it in C is valuable. Again, not a very well developed thought, and maybe there's some huge problems that I'm not seeing here. But anyway, those are the and fourth and not unimportantly, I'm probably most fluent in vanilla C today because that's where I've been doing work for other purposes the last few years. So that's why.
Well, thanks, Martin. What's the next milestone where we should check in again on this? Do you have plans, like specific plans?
Yeah, well, like I mean, there's some obvious things to do. Like I would like to have. Well, right now, you can actually break it pretty easily by like it'll pick UDP and UDP's not there and stuff like that. So I want to make it like not break, like eliminate those sorts of rough edges, fill in like how let people initiate connections, that kind of basic thing. There's a lot of directions I want to go with this. Obviously, if there are people who want to contribute, that would be if there's interest in a particular thing, that would certainly. People who are going to put in some code or get a lot of votes in how this is going to go. It's a target-rich environment for sure. I would like to, but after that, like basic fragility is addressed, I would probably like to pursue the transport discovery stuff. Maybe put in, like I mentioned, a Taps D, because it seems like that's where this is unique relative to the other coding efforts in particular. But yeah, like I said, lots of people get a vote if they're willing to help.
Cool. Should we move on? So I guess the next agenda item is going to the GitHub. I first a mea culpa. This week kind of exploded on me in terms of busyness, and so I am behind on my email. I saw that we got a couple of GenArt reviews from Robert Sparks. Have those been ported into the issue tracker? Okay, so that's what that flurry of issues were that I saw come out.
Yeah.
Do you, Teresa, do you know, has there been any activity in the sector or what was the other one? Was it the art?
For Sector, no, we got arts, but we did not get Sector. If at least I didn't see it. Let me check back what it says now. Yeah, it says Sector review, but it also says August, which I mean, art actually pushed their due date by a month, and then they actually did it. Sector, not sure, but I think they had I think they had an assigned reviewer actually. Oh yeah, who has also accepted that assignment, but has not completed the review.
Okay. All right, so it's still out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the review of, from Robert was really detailed. I was really impressed by that.
Nice having somebody from outside look at the doc.
Yeah, I looked at the review, and there's very little of that I don't think we have to address with basically actually either text in the document to clarify things or going back and thinking about stuff. It will be like, it's kind of annoying because it's a lot of work. We're about to hit issue number 1000 on these documents. But I think that, like, we all owe Robert a beverage. Maybe serially as opposed to in parallel, because that would be a lot of beverages. Yeah, I was very happy with that review.
So don't forget to put the reviewers name. Sometimes they do really good job.
So I'm not sure what the most productive way to do this is, because I have also, like, beyond looking at the thing and going, shit, that's a long email, and then, just skimming it to see what, if there was actually going to be work out of this. I have not had a chance to really do anything since the last interim. You'll see I still have a few things that are assigned to me that I haven't done yet. Oh, wait, I do have at least, back in February, I do have at least one PR. So I would say let's probably go to the PRs first, get those merged, and then spend a little bit of time signing Tommy up to do all of the changes that Robert asked for. Or at least figure out who's the right person to do some of these things, right? So
I'll,
sound like a plan?
I'll volunteer to take many of these small editorial ones. So there are quite
Awesome.
many that I picked as I just saw it's a small paragraph, one sentence. I didn't want to miss any. But many of these issues are just remove a sentence here, fix this sentence there, fix that paragraph. So I mean, these I can take care of.
Cool. We can mark them editorial then, sort of en masse. The ones.
Yeah, I tried that. I did mark them. Like some.
Okay. Cool.
Editorial.
Should we take a look at the pull request first and see if we can go ahead and merge those?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Cool. By the way, this is awesome. You can actually tell MeetEcho just to share a window. So this is like yet another vote for continuing in MeetEcho. I think Kyle's 855, we're probably going, increase consistency of formatting, spelling. I think that one is going to go into merge conflict hell soon. We should possibly restart that one. Let's look. Multicast example code. Gory looked at it. Tommy fixed it.
Yeah, I have not had a chance to look at this one yet.
I would like you to take a look at this one. Having recently done a TSV art review that was very multicast heavy, I'm like, I have learned how much I don't know about multicast. So
I will have a look and see how much of the stuff I used to know about multicast I can remember.
All right. Oh,
We're still waiting for it to roll out.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you could review that one and then check it off, then I'll come back sort of like next week and click some buttons.
Yep.
This is SO reuse on multicast. It's got a few.
Suspect that's in the same category.
All right, those are. Oh, must be done from the files tab, right? Thank you. Then why do you give me the button if I have to do it from the files tab? Good. That's there, but we'll want to reviewers. Colin, sweet. What does connected mean? This still has changes requested. Gory is also not here, correct? I think we used all of our Gory time with the 73 issues that he added to the thing. This one's good, has an LGTM.
Yeah, I thought this. I had a comment I put on the receive in general, but I thought this was fine.
Yeah, we can merge it.
We need to be a little clearer for receive about how it relates to the object-based stuff. It seems to be getting a little bit heavy on byte arrays.
Yeah, okay, both of these are good. We'll just add those suggestions and merge this. Wait, did we not have two? Yeah. We'll wait for that check to turn green, and then we can merge it, and then we can go and triage some issues. So are you done marking editorial issues on API editorial, Michael?
On editorial issues and what?
So we've got
No, I haven't assigned them to me yet. Shall I? But I don't know. I want to assign all editorial ones to me because I'm not sure I can handle them all. Like there may be some that I'm not
too
the right
late.
guy to do it. Yeah. Assigning. Let me see.
You can always
You can take the
reassign.
API editorials, and I'll take the architecture editorials. How's that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not an author of architecture anyway. If that makes a difference, but I can take the API editorials. I wonder if I can take them all, but
You can give them back to me if you get bored with them.
yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. Just assign them to me then.
Some you think I should handle, you can also assign them to me.
Say again?
If there is some you think I should handle, you can also assign them to me.
All right. So I think there are a few non-editorial issues on architecture. And it seems like at least one of these, so the separation of architecture and interface documents, one is it seems like we should have the opinion as a working group. So I would say we start with the art review architecture, like everything up to this already has someone assigned to it at least. I would maybe start with 879, the ones that are not marked editorial, and start either discussion or triage out to people. Does that sound like a good way to go?
Yeah.
Good. So observation request group rethink separation of architecture and interface. Warning sign that interface is a normative reference for architecture. I think the question here is, would it make sense to have architecture as informative? Right, like, so I think that's the ask, is go through here and say, okay, the normative thing is the API, and architecture just basically gives you an introduction to the concepts to understand how the API works, which is not what we set out to do. But I think that one of the reasons that it wasn't what we set up, I think there are two reasons that, surprise and whatever are our weapons. I think there are three reasons that we set out to do it that way. Reason number one is just straight up from the way the charter is put together. The architecture might have independent, in a world where we didn't get all the way to finishing the API doc, which is not the world we live in, the architecture might have had independent utility, right? In terms of like influencing people to shape their APIs like this. Because, I mean, the charter basically said, hey, we can do some API work in order to experiment with these concepts, but not necessarily, to define the future interface to the transport layer. I think we got farther than that, right? The second reason to do that is that we wanted to finish the architecture document first and say, these are the things that we agree with. And basically, if we end up making changes to the API doc that don't fit into that architecture, well, we shouldn't do that. And that's not actually how we've ended up working. The way that we've ended up working is we've now gotten to the point where most of the concepts are being built in the API doc first, and then backported to architecture if architecture is disagrees with it, right? It's like, it's okay, well, if the API says this, the API is what we want, therefore the architecture should bend to the API. We haven't done much of this, but like a little bit, like the last one was connection grouping. We had to go back and rephrase connection grouping in the architecture. So I can absolutely see why, Robert coming to this with, a background in a whole lot of, the internet, but coming to this document for the first time might think that this looks weird, right? Because like this separation between architecture and API is, I don't want to say obsolete, but it's certainly historical. It certainly reflects the state of these documents a long time ago. My counter argument, my argument to not doing this would be, I don't want to, it's a bunch of work. I mean, but I'm not like, I think if we say we're not going to do this, we should have better counter arguments than I don't want to. And with that, the floor is open.
So, are there general principles we can highlight in the architecture just by pulling some stuff into interface? Or is the answer just to glom interface and architecture together into one draft? Or something else? I kind of like the idea of here are our principles. I mean,
Yes,
we have others,
yeah.
but these are the current ones.
I was going to ask the same question. I mean, paraphrasing what I think Brian said was the separation was helpful for our process, but may not be as important to the reader coming in after the fact. And so it does raise the question about whether, is there value in having two documents? Could a new reader skip the architecture document and pick up interface and make use of it?
I would hope so.
So I think there's probably valuable text in the architecture document that if we would merge it, we would have to introduce to the API document. That makes me think that the sheer length is a reason against that, because it's already very long, and making that even longer is probably not what we want. I would rather, I mean, if he's concerned about the overlap, if we do keep it separate, then maybe we want to take some architecture principles out of this document and put it to the architecture one, to make it a bit shorter and more to the point.
Yeah, I think we could probably like move section 4 into API and then dedupe. Right? It's like, because section 4 is the shape of the API. I mean, maybe the subsections of section 4, right? Like, so 4.1 and 4.2 could move into the interface document, or 4.1 could move in interface and 4.2 could move into implementation, right?
Yeah, if we just got a little bit concrete and need to move some of the summary stuff into the interface.
4.2 is really something about the idea on underlying text. So 4.2 can't.
Barely hear you.
Your audio is very low.
Yeah, your levels are bad.
Okay, then I turn up the level a little bit. Better?
Yes, that helps.
So I think 4.2 we can't move into the implementation because it's really the background on how we think about racing and how we look at into the general concept, how everything falls together. So about 4.1 moving to API, this could be done, but then I think we really
4.2 would then move to API as well.
I'm not sure whether we then have to find a little bit more boilerplate, or at least a shorter version of 4.2 into the architecture, because we really have to say we are doing racing as a means of selecting protocols.
But my concern was that the API is already getting too long. So moving stuff into the API document.
Well, I think if we move section 4.1 into the API doc, we're going to end up deduping most of it. Right.
And trimming down, so this could really be one way of addressing this, trimming down the architecture to really an overview document and moving all the architectural API stuff into the API, but this would really make the API a really long document. And I think
yeah, then we'd have to trim down the API just by avoiding repetitive text, basically.
But still, I think this is a discussion we maybe want to put on the mailing list and get more opinions on what does it mean for people reading it. And is it really helpful to have a shorter architecture with a much longer API?
Well, I think from a document user standpoint, right? Like, and this is the other thing is, this is the second paragraph here, right? Like, consider reformulating this as an overview, right? Like, so we start with the principles. Like, so that he's right that this document is basically the way that it is because of the process that we use to get to it. But if we take a pretty hard edit pass at Arch and say, okay, we're going to make this an overview, introduction, and principles, right? Like, so, and you could even keep the short name of the document and call it sort of the transport services architectural principles even, right? Like, so, or an introduction to taps. And yeah, and like look at one sort of like the high level overview, to the principles, which is really sort of section 3. Big
So
chunks of
should
section
Arch
2 and 3 are principles, right?
so should Arch be a informational document rather than standard?
Yeah, if we do, if we basically turn it into an intro and principles, then it should be an informational document. Right, like, so right now we have, you know, our 1.3 language, or 2119 language is more or less putting requirements on the API doc and on implementations, right? And requirements on API doc are basically APIs or requirements on us. Okay, cool, we met those, neat. We don't need the language anymore. Requirements on the implementation belong in the implementation document, correct? Or in the API document if they, if like non-implementation of them is going to lead to interoperability issues. So I think the first thing we could do on this is take all the normative language out, right? And then the second thing that we could do that would be easy would be consider renaming the doc.
So that
Because, yeah.
you get a choice between just reading this to get a high-level overview and not caring about the API, or if you really want to implement it, you don't necessarily have to read this, but you read the API.
Does
It's maybe a way of using the documents.
Gonna want the high-level overview without the API? Like, who is that read?
That's the question, right? Maybe just people who want to understand what TAPS is about without actually wanting to implement it.
And that would be a slightly different document than the document that we have.
Yeah.
Why would that be a different document, Brian? Because the architecture document should actually be able to answer most of those questions that Michael was asking. Or?
So I think it's a different document because this document was basically written to give requirements to us, the working group, right?
Yeah.
It was required to give. Yeah.
Yeah. So the question then is, why does it need to be an RFC?
No, I mean, I'm thinking like this. I mean, obviously we are pretty expert on doing things in TAPS right now, but I mean, this document should also tell us more about, like, I mean, it does tell us about how TAPS works and how things are expected and things. Obviously, it puts some requirements on the rest of the things that we do, but it is a good intro, so to say. Not aimed for it, but it does keep some.
So when I went through this implementation exercise, I did not really use this document. I did have the benefit of being in this working group and just picking up the architecture through osmosis. And I will say, like, the one thing that's been very useful from the architecture document is Figure 1 and Figure 2, which explains it's a diagram of the architecture, which has been very useful for slideware about what hell I'm doing in TAPS.
Yes. Well, and this is like also Figure 3 and Figure 4 have been insanely useful for slideware as well, right? It's like in terms of like, what is a connection object and how is this slightly different? Having this lifetime thing here, like I think that Robert's onto something. I think that this document is almost a really good introduction to the high-level concepts, but it says in its abstract that it's an architecture definition. And the point that he's making with like the first sentence of this review and the first sentence of the interface review that Michael, that you added here, is the normative architecture definition is actually inside the API draft. Maybe we should lean into lean into this document being published as the, hey, you would like to understand enough about taps to write slideware about it, right? Which is actually an important thing for, early adoption of an effort to implement something like this. We turn that into this document, and then it's basically, we rename it to an introduction to the transport services architecture.
Design principles or something.
Yeah, I mean, it has value for the future as well, right? We're doing
Yes.
this API now, but it may not be the API for all time. And at some point in the future, maybe somebody wants to do an updated API for completely new protocols and whatever. It probably still makes sense to adhere to what we lay out here as requirements.
And I think that like having a non-mutable sort of like thing that says, here's the goal, here's what we set out to do. I think that's important as well. So I think that basically there's a not very much to do. This is less work way to address this, right? Which fixes my I don't want a problem. Where we basically then do a pass over this document and say, okay, we're gonna make sure this document is useful as an introduction to the architecture. Does that seem a reasonable thing to put time into?
I think so.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Question is
Introduction
whether
is
we then need to have another pass of stuff that may be moved to the API in the second step better.
Well, to me, I mean, if there is something overlapping between this document and API document, that doesn't hurt. I mean, you already have text and everything. You can just copy things if this is something really important.
I think if I understand what Philip's getting at, is that if we're going to change this from normative to informative, we need to make sure that there's nothing.
The cross-referencing.
Yeah, that it really isn't. There isn't a hard dependency on any information that's in the architecture document.
I also would add to that stuff that is on the detail level, calling out of or calling.
I can't hear you. Can you move close to your mic? Something. It's very hard for me to hear you.
Okay, better?
No, thanks. Yeah.
So I think we should probably also look about stuff that's on a different abstraction level or detail level in the Arch document that is giving requirements and is better than moved to the API. But this won't be too much stuff. This is probably 1 or 2 pages that have to be moved there.
I'm sorry, say again.
I think your sentence already covers it.
Okay.
Nicely.
Yep. Okay.
Remove or move stuff to API that is on a too detailed level. Yep.
Cool. Tommy, you can take this, right? Super. Next.
That's a pain, this.
Yeah, and I guess I'm going to add that to our notes, at least for the meeting, just to have it somewhere on the list.
Yes.
I'm not sure if we should have a separate email confirmation discussion on the list, given that most sort of
Oh.
active
Yeah, I mean,
participants.
we can. So the one person who's here who would have a very strong opinion about that is now the owner of the bug. So.
Great.
What do we think about capitalization of terms? Like we've tried to have sort of like, you know, terms that are entities within the architecture capitalized. Do we want to keep that as a convention? Because if I mean, it's same as 672, right? Like there's the post.
Yeah, it just needs to be consistent.
Yeah.
I think it's a good convention. But yeah, it needs to be consistent.
Just have a capital connection to sort of confirm that this is a TAPS connection and not a generic
Right.
connection
Yeah,
or TCP connection.
Yeah, right. That was
Right. So we know we need to do that pass. We haven't done it yet. Then we have
Yeah.
check the use of normative text, which is something that we're going to do in architecture as part of this separation of architecture and interface document. So those will get
Can we sign this to Kyle? Oh, not this one, the other one.
and then this one as well. And then we have final bullet of overview. The last bullet in the overview is out of place. The others are an overview of the document, but this is a description of oops.
Yeah, that's right.
I feel like we added this somewhere when we were.
Sounds like it should.
Did we add this to the wrong bullet list? We might have added this to the wrong bullet list.
Yeah, it sounds like it should be in the API section or section 4 somewhere. Does it go here?
Yeah, it's supposed to be down here. I'm not sure what happened here. Let's see. Hold on. Taps Arch. Let's go to the code. Overview should be up here.
I suspect it got mismerged and then overtaken by events.
Yeah, this is a recent. No linked issue. I'm not sure how this got added here.
Just got added to the wrong place.
Yeah. But yeah, this is 862.
Do you want to assign it to me and Gori, and we'll try and figure out where it's supposed to be?
Cool. I'm going to call this editorial. So that is all of the non-editorial commentary on the architecture document. And I think actually we have enough here to, oh, and we already have a pull request for this one. Oh, this is the one that we decided was actually doable. So we'll just merge it and then that one's fixed. Okay, cool. So I think we've triaged all of the non-editorial architecture ones, and we can move on to just for completeness. And now we can go on to API.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what you want to do.
I don't like this.
I can see his point. I totally can see it. It's ugly, right? Saying it's an integer, but it also has special value. I know various ways to do it. I mean, make the special value an extra parameter, make it compound type, make, I don't know. We should just probably
this really depends on the language you're implementing it in as well.
Right.
This is a C implementation. You need to do the integer thing. If you're doing it in Rust or something, then you do something radically different.
Yeah.
So one way to fix this in the API would be to get rid of all of our types, right? Which I think, yeah, which would cause implementers to have exactly the look that Martin has on his face right now. So we probably shouldn't do that. I don't know. I don't know if you're following. A look came across your face. It was like, get rid of types. And you're like, so we probably shouldn't do that. Which one are we talking about specifically here? We're talking about.
Well, these are the things that, I mean, there were a couple of cases where I probably had something like -1 as an error. Carl rightly complained that this is very C.
Yeah.
And so we said, okay, there are these special defined error values, but still it's an integer otherwise. So that is ugly. I mean, well, special anyway. I mean, I can get that he'd rather have a separate parameter or something, but it's an abstract API at the same time.
So we only have special value full coverage in.
That's the only one?
One case.
Can we just say this returns an integer or an error code? And just
if that is all it is, this is going to be easy.
If that's all it is, yeah.
Yeah. About that.
What is that?
including integer infinity and not a number, making it consistent there, and full coverage equals infinity?
No integer type.
But
So nan is specifically an IEEE floating point concept. I've never seen an integer type implementation that has a nan in it. So I think we just make checksum coverage ugly.
No, it's not just that. It's not just that.
It's not just that?
Yep.
Yeah,
We also have,
813, for instance, it says numeric. I mean, it's not integer, it says numeric, but it says numeric with special value disabled. I mean, it's the same issue, isn't it? If you call it an integer, if you say numeric and it's got a special value.
Yeah, yes, this also has the same.
And timeout for keep alive has it, and bounds on send and receive rate has it. Numeric with special value, unlimited.
Can we just copy the Rust approach and define a type which is a result, which is either an error code or a whatever, and then just say this returns a result, which is.
So, but the thing is, it's not an error, right? Like, so full coverage is not an error, right? It's a different type, right? And it's like, so.
I mean, there is an easy way out to add a new parameter. We can say full coverage, yes or no. It's a boolean, and if it's no, then the integer takes effect. We can do it like that.
Right.
We can do it like that, or we can do the way you do it in a typed language and say actually it's an enumeration of this type or this type, and put a note in the introduction that says we use this type, and if you're implementing it in C, it probably turns into a magic error code value on an int or whatever.
Yeah, is everybody gonna like that?
I mean, those are the two fundamental approaches, right? Or you throw an exception, but that only really works at errors, and I think we use it more broadly.
I mean, I can have a pass once I know what we want to decide.
I would use a type enumeration instead. It's ugly, but like there would then be maybe guidance in implementation that, hey, if you're doing this in a language that doesn't use type enumerations, then do something. Yeah. Like from a type theoretic standpoint, this is actually a type enumeration.
Yeah.
And if you're building it in Rust or Swift or something, I think it maps pretty directly. It doesn't work with C, of course. But.
And like Absile has a bunch of stuff like this as well, right? Like, so you can even do it in, the flavor of C++ that I write for money these days lets you do so as well.
Yeah.
So next, definition of numeric in 1.1 is circular. Yeah, I'm going to call that editorial.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
The reason calling it numeric was that we didn't want to specify whether it's a floating point or a fixed point or other magic type.
Yes. I mean, it's probably going to be a float, right? But what the first sentence of the API summary claims. What does the first sentence of the API summary claim?
Is the basic common abstract application programming interface to the transport services architecture defined in the Taps architecture? I mean, our API is the basic common abstract application. So this is about the separation between the architecture and interface documents, I think.
I don't understand what like when he says API summary. What API summary?
In the API draft section 3.
Oh,
I mean,
I'm
that is
over the
called
architecture
API
draft.
summary.
Duh. Yeah, I need to go to the
That
interface
says
draft.
that our
Ah,
API is an API for the
Sorry, I'm
architecture.
looking at the wrong document. That's okay. That's much this.
Yeah, so I think it's just the same complaint about
Yeah.
separation of documents.
Yep. I think that, yeah, I actually think we can also lose this sentence. I think that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, that's okay. You can give it to me and say remove the sentence. Thank you. Look at that yet.
Yeah. Just add a context here, right? Because we talk about message context later, and we kind of allied it here. I think this is as simple as.
Yeah.
Hey, look, it's editorial.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Michael.
All these blue icons.
Yeah, but it's going to be like one PR that's going to close
Yeah.
35 issues, so it's going to be super satisfying to land that one.
That is right. It's gonna remove many small things.
Transport property names in 4.1. I think you need to be more specific than alphanumeric. I don't.
Explicitly list what characters are allowed. I don't even know. I mean, I have to admit, I did that in a hurry. So I didn't look up what these things are as I filed them.
Uppercase ASCII only. Field still.
Emojis. Only emojis.
Just putting this for one.
So, I mean, yes, we should probably be clear on that.
So there's this actually goes back to this discussion, and I think I was in the minority here in thinking that this was not a super necessary thing to do, if only because you're going to end up with a bunch of names that are not going to end up being parsable as identifiers in every language that you might want to implement them in, right? Like, so, you know, if you're trying to get rid of delimiters, then you can't use dashes and you possibly can't use underscores. So this is one of those things that we started slightly over specifying it, and since we've over specified it, we need to over specify it all the way. But yeah, A through Z, 0 through 9 underscore.
Yeah, exactly. Let's do it like that. Let's make him happy and put it like this.
Yep.
And I can do it. It's as editorial as they come. Just didn't look at it.
There's like a way to like add GitHub automation that like will automatically assign somebody based on the labels, right?
Double check with the underscore what we did there. I think we had the special case that we wanted the other underscore to automatically mutate to whatever concept you had as word separators in your language.
Mm.
So, for example, if you
but then you still need the underscore, right? I mean, the underscore needs to be your name.
So you would, for example, if you transfer it to Java, you would just remove the underscore and camel case it.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think we want to specify at that level.
I mean, we do specify already in the API doc that like, hey, you should make this look like, you should make this look like your language, because otherwise people are going to be like, oh, this is some weird Java stuff. I don't want that. Or, oh, this is some weird Python stuff. I don't want that. But yeah.
What do we use these identifiers for? Are they just in the IANA registry, or do they actually appear in the code? I can't remember.
They're not yet in IANA registry, but they are good candidates to become it. So
Right. We decided we didn't want to do an IANA registry because it's a lot of work, and we'd come back and do that later if it turned out we needed it.
Yeah.
I mean, the alternative is to just make it more generic and just say these are sort of textual labels or something, and leave it vague. But then we'd have to be clear. Well, I think that I guess the real question here is if we want them to be API visible constants, we need to be precise. If they're just labels which get translated into something concrete, then they can be more legally specified here.
So we wanted, and this was something we discussed with Gori quite intensely, had to have something that you can automatically translate across implementations.
Does it have to be automatically translatable, or does it have to be person translatable? I guess is the real fundamental question.
So I like having the same names for things actually. So I'm not such a fan of underspecifying, because then, I imagine two implementers talking to each other, and they can talk about things like the capacity profile and the parameter called something and the property called something. It's the same name. So I think, without having to go into capitalization or underscore or whatever, but at least having the same names for things, that
right,
that has value.
But they're human. They're names that people use. The way they'd be represented in the code doesn't have to be exactly consistent.
No.
One could be camel case, one could be underscore separated, all this crap, right?
All of these, exactly. and each of these translation things, even in a world where people are not being 100% consistent, these are regular expressions that will parse down into a finite state automaton that can fit into a tiny amount of silicon, right? Like, so it's like using regexes to bash from one context into another is like maybe not super pretty, but I'd hazard a guess that it's been at least 15% of everyone's job in this room at some point. It's computers, what we do. I'm a fan of underspecifying here, but I understand that underspecifying makes certain people twitchy, including probably Robert, actually, our art reviewer. But I say I would leave this up to Michael as a how much time he wants to spend on it executive decision.
Yeah, maybe I can give the option. I can write it, like you said, as labels with a namespace, and as an example, a namespace could include these letters and something. So it's kind of okay for everybody.
The namespace used in the labels is programming language dependent. Go figure it out.
Exactly. And then we can just give an example, saying an example will include uppercase, lowercase letters, and digits, and an underscore.
Do we need host or service? Actually, we mean service. Hey, look, this one is.
I wasn't sure if it is. I didn't look it up. Are you
sure this one's pretty clearly just service. I don't like.
Yeah, that makes it editorial.
Right. I mean, because host is like, what about cloud? Cloud? What's that?
Do we use endpoint?
No, but the endpoint, like it's multiple endpoints that are then going to connect to the same thing, right?
Yeah,
and we use the word
could be
host to mean thing.
A DNS name or an Anycast thing or whatever. Yeah, right.
Could be it could be. There might be some application level semantics that you know when you're setting up all of these remote endpoints. You know that they're the same. There might be multiple front ends, like transport front ends, that will go to the same application backend, right? The point we want to make here is like you shouldn't have two remote endpoints, one of which is a web server and one of which is a mail server, because then you're going to have a bad day.
Yeah, they're logically the same thing, even though they're probably physically not. Yeah.
Yes. An endpoint cannot have multiple identifiers of the same type set. Cannot have two IP addresses specified.
Yeah, I think we've looped through this one several times before.
Yeah. There's need for more discussion and clarity around the restriction net. We've had plenty of discussion on it. I don't think we have clarity. I think that's coming out in the review.
I think we ended up in having multiple endpoints you can specify, or a set of endpoints you can specify, just to make sure that you are able to manually specify candidate lists.
Does it work for well, I suppose V4 as well, but for V6 where you can have multiple IPv6 addresses for the same.
Right.
I'm not sure we want to represent that as several different endpoints because they're all the same actual interface. Yeah, with just different scripts.
Do we need to specify this? Can we just nuke the paragraph?
That's what I'm thinking. Maybe we could just remove these two sentences at least. The one you marked and the one following, and assign it to Tommy to be sure that this isn't wrong.
Yeah. Oh, no, you don't want to delete that. Actually.
I think you marked too much. Not too separate. Well, no, it's okay, I guess. Maybe. No, it's okay.
Yeah.
3 sentences, but.
Possibly want to say. Do we want to say two? That they must be distinct identifiers? Kind of pointless, maybe.
So I found the issue where we previously discussed this, issue 571, and it's a lot of people are saying that yes, you can add multiple IP addresses. You also can have an alias endpoint to an endpoint.
Yeah, that's what
But
Robert is saying.
one endpoint has at most one port or service and at most one host name.
Oh.
But it also mentions some text, which I'm not finding in the interface document anymore. So I guess this has gone through some iterations.
Yes.
So after 1,000 issues, we wrap around.
I suppose.
So I think
oh, now I see. The pre-connection can have multiple endpoints, but it doesn't say that the endpoint can have multiple IP addresses in here. No.
Yeah, I mean, you can always presumably fake it by saying you have as many endpoints as you like, but I'm not sure why that's better than just saying an endpoint with more than one IP address.
Well, I mean, the point that Robert is making here is that it's inconsistent, right? Like, if you can have a name and an IP address, well, what do you do with that if the name resolves to something other than the IP address, right? And I think this is one of those things where underspecified ambiguity is probably okay. And like, given that there's not much clarity on this sentence, we can just delete it. I think that's the right thing to do. So I think that what's in the if Tommy agrees to nuke it, then we nuke it.
Yeah, I mean, presumably if you keep calling resolve on what you get back on at the endpoints, you will eventually end up with a list of endpoints, each of which represents a single IP address.
Right. Yes.
But that's not necessarily the starting point.
Right. Moving on. Would there be any benefit of having some? Ooh, finally a feature request. Sweet.
If you can find someone who understands SRV records, then
yes.
Yeah, this seems like something we should have. Yeah.
This is a feature request. I'll assign myself. Why 2 ways to set interfaces? Why does the API have both the ability to say local specifier with interface and to set interface requirements on transport properties? Why not just keep the latter and remove the former?
I would agree with that. I mean,
I think this is because originally the interface specification stuff I think we added this to transport properties later, right? Like the interface specification used to be used to not allow you to just say straight up use this interface name, and then we added it at some point, not realizing that it was, or not, we added it at this point because he didn't want you to have to do it all the way at sort of like endpoint specification time, like, because this would actually allow you to put in a policy as opposed to dumping it into the application.
You can change it later.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I agree that not being limited to the specification time means that the with interface could go.
I can probably imagine a bunch of implementations that having both ways for a bunch of parameters. What works best for that implementation?
But there is, but like 2 paths to the same thing is, I don't know, very Perl.
So the problem is for multicast we might need the formal for the selection itself. The latter has advantages. Yeah.
Why would we need the former for multicast?
So if you're implementing stuff like link local or multicast, you really have to specify the interface. Especially for IPv6 link local, you need that.
Yeah, but you can do that as a property on the pre-connection.
Right.
It's just a syntactical thing.
But that's weird. Having a link local address on the endpoint and then specify the interface on a pre-connection is weird.
So it's about this being the endpoint and not the pre-connection where we then adjust the properties of the connection.
Is this a defaults versus this specific instance question as well?
It doesn't bind to a pre-connection, it binds to the transport properties, right?
So removing it from the properties would actually remove a lot of weird special case properties, by the way.
So I really see the pre-connection thing is like kind of it would be something that you could have like a policy thing, right? Like saying, hey, I want to bind this application only to the wireless interface, the wired interface, or whatever. Whereas the local specifier is really something that you might get from some other place in the application.
Mm-hmm.
So if we keep this, then we're going to need to explain it, like explain the choice and that it's an explicit choice.
I can take this one.
So, Philip, you made an argument for keeping this. Can you write the text as to why?
Wait, so we're keeping both?
I think we need to keep both and tell the difference where it makes sense.
Like, to me, the pre-connection binding makes a little bit more sense than the local specifier, but let's see a PR that would, like, explain it.
Why is it a pre-connection binding? It's either in the transport properties or in the endpoint, both of which are inputs to the pre-connection.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But so my thought here is that you might have a different way to plumb. You might want to have in your application a different user interface for the endpoint specification as opposed to the user interface for the transport property specification. You might not even bubble up the transport property specification to the user, whereas the endpoint you would bubble up to the user, right? And it's a little bit weird if you have this thing that's bubbled up to the user and then it's like, okay, well, this turns into a transport property.
But like the user doesn't interface with taps. It's always mediated through the application.
Right, but it's user interfacing with the application, but you might have something that goes directly, like, I could see an application that would have UI elements that would sort of, their model might even be an endpoint, right? It's like you go into the little thing, you type an address or a host name, and it like goes, the endpoint knows what kind of string it is and then resolves it, right? Whereas only certain applications that would be sort of like, sort of like network diagnostic sort of things would have a reason to bubble up any of the transport the transport properties, and that, like, having this be the only transport property that gets exposed in the UI is a little strange. I don't have a strong opinion here, but I can kind of see the argument.
What I kind of hate about this is having to adjudicate conflicts between the two,
right,
in the code.
So,
which I've not written yet, which makes me even less happy about it.
So my gut feeling is that it would rather belong to the endpoint than in the transport properties. But this is just a gut feeling at the moment.
But the transport properties already have a interface specifier that says kind of like requirements for the interface. And we basically just added the ability to put a name by string later on, right? Hold on, let me actually find what we're talking about here.
Yes, you have the preference in the in the properties, you have the preferences.
Interface instance or type.
Yeah.
An interface instance is just is the same thing as an interface specifier and local specifier.
Yeah. And the local specifier, we just needed. So for the local specifier, we need something like the interface for a linked local address, but otherwise you don't need it.
Well, so there's like Martin raises a really good issue. Let's say that your transport properties, which you have not bubbled up to the UI, have even just a non-enumerated list of interface identifiers. They just have some interface properties, and then you hand a local specifier to the same pre-connection that has a set of interfaces that do not meet those properties. Boom, you can't connect.
Yeah.
Right. That's unambiguous. But what happens if you have a local specifier that specifies one interface and the transport properties specify concretely a different interface? I would say that the logic clearly says, boom, you can't connect.
Yes.
This is it's more code, and it's another foot gun to create weird failure cases
Yes.
that are hard to debug. And I would, what gets bubbled up to the user, I think, is just, it's neither here nor there. The application is going to need a knob to declare interface preferences, and whether that's in the endpoint or the transport parameters. I mean, when you do this, you're going to create an endpoint, you're going to create transport properties, and you're going to build all that stuff. And I mean, you could almost have it be one giant blob in principle, although,
yeah.
I mean, I really feel strongly there should be one, and I don't have a strong opinion about which one it is. The only real practical difference is with the pre-connection, you can send multiple endpoints, but only one set of properties. So
yeah,
it is more flexible to put it in endpoints, I guess. But the semantic argument or the aesthetic argument or the metaphysical sense of where it should be is not all that interesting to me.
So I think in the end, it turns up to the following conflict. If you really want a hard specification, it's much better in the endpoint specification. If you want to really express a preference, please avoid cellular, then it's much better in the preferences, because we don't have the preference concept in the endpoint specifier. And this is the conflict we have to tackle here.
That's true.
So, I mean, one unambiguous way to keep them both would basically be to say that that this property, what's it called? Interface instance or type only gets evaluated if the local specifier doesn't specify an interface. Right, so if it's star, if it's the equivalent to star, if it's just I want to bind to everything, then interface instance and type gets used. Otherwise, it gets ignored. That's an unambiguous fix to this that allows you to keep both.
Yes, but that's not up to this flexibility the API has. So what you could do is you could specify a list of 12 interfaces as explicit identifiers.
Yes.
In the endpoint, and then have a preference as a property that says which one you most like. And then have
I think this is too ambiguous to fix in the remainder of this call, because I think we have two other things we want to talk about. How about I assign you and Martin to this one, and you go figure it out?
Yeah, we should.
So I saw some stuff in the chat. Do we want to talk about Zahed's point?
Yeah, I was thinking to just use the last 10 minutes of this call, but we can start now too.
What do we want to do? Yeah, I mean, we can do one more.
One discussion on the call today. But
go ahead. Sorry.
I said we were actually not going to have the author count discussion on it today, but the other point about how to handle how to involve our reviewer in the process and stuff.
Oh, we're talking about so this would be for the art reviewer, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Or
yeah,
for
I think that's actually good. But if you had one more issue, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I mean, I think I agree. It's really hard to understand the sequence of things, but yes, that's what I would have hoped that we can do.
Thank you, Colin.
Is he smiling and looking? Yeah, I see him smile.
You can't look. Is the camera good enough to tell the difference between a smile and a grimace? I don't know.
I mean, it wasn't. It was a. You know, it was a. It was a smile with experience, is what it was. It was experienced smile.
So smile of approval.
Ask what kind of camera do you use? It is really good on it.
It's a mirrorless.
Yeah. You look like you've got a real camera there.
I've got a real camera and a real lens. Yeah.
Yeah.
So some of this travel money I would have spent going to ITF, so I'm buying a real camera.
I did that for a while at the beginning of the pandemic, and then I realized that, like, so my camera is a Fuji X-T2, which is, like, notoriously, it's an ARM-based computer strapped to a heat sink in the shape of a camera, and it has various thermal issues, and, like, my normal day of, like, 4 to 6 hours of meetings, it couldn't do. Like, at the end of the day, it was making noises, and I was like, I don't really want to kill my actual photography camera for slightly better bokeh on a GBC. So
yeah. Panasonic have one which will run all day, every day without heat issues because it's designed for video like this.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm staring at this text and I'm not sure I understand it, which means maybe we should go on to the discussion about how to involve reviewers.
This is Robert stumbling over the thing we recently talked about with local copies and not local copies and so forth. And I thought that we made it clear and nice, we had it resolved, but he stumbles over it.
Yeah, and I'm stumbling over his stumbling. So
yeah.
All right. We will pick that up next time or in the interim.
Sounds good to me.
Oh, the interim between this and the next interim. I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's another thing that I would like to briefly. But maybe first.
Yeah, maybe we should.
So we got 2 excellent and long reviews. I'm not sure if anybody has actually gotten back to Robert saying thank you. These were excellent reviews. If nobody wants to do it, I'm happy to just send a quick thing, if nothing else. But
the entire working group appreciates it, so I think this is something that can come from the working group officially.
So I think they're basically. I wanted to raise this question because we have some issues with this GitHub review process, and I was one of the thing, like when I was really reviewing, giving comments to HTTP documents. They actually discussed it. They closed this one, and then I was in a position not to get engaged. So the question here is basically I'm asking, if you're taking these issues or from the review comments creating issues, will you be are we going to involve the reviewer in that process, saying like you can come and chat with us at GitHub? Many reviewer might not do that or might do that, but at least we need to update them with this information, like here I have created issues and here you can engage. And if they doesn't engage, then basically we resolve these things and basically send another note like here what we have done. So like, I'm not giving any suggestion here, I'm just giving some discussion thing, like what you guys want to do.
So Gory answered back to the reviewer, and I just copied the same method to the reviewer, and everybody's saying I've created these issues and they're now in GitHub, and this is where you can reach them.
Did you include a link that allows? Did you include a link that allows him that filters based on the issues that are derived from his review? I mean, we've got a naming convention, but I mean, we could go add labels or something.
Yeah, it's pretty clear from the name, isn't it? Art.
Yeah, we got a lot of issues, but sure.
It's just a link to the issue tracker that we put.
Okay.
I mean, there's a big batch of them with a consistent naming convention right at the top. I think you'll find them.
Yep.
So was this message also asking him to be engaging in the GitHub, or just the information, like we have created this amount of issues based on your
just
review?
The information. I just copied literally the statement from Gory because I thought he probably does it the right way. I wanted to do it the same way. Yeah. I added this as a set of issues in GitHub where we can also discuss whether/how to resolve these : and then a link to the issue tracker. Gory.
So if Teresa's going to send a message to him thanking him, we can just add a note onto the message that says, we welcome your involvement in the resolution of these. They're all logged in our issue tracker, and you can be as involved as you want to be in subsequent discussion. And I think that's it's a good point. We want to open the door and make it clear that if he's interested in seeing if any particular aspects that he wants to see how they're disposed of, this is a way for him to find them and follow them, express opinions on them. But I don't think we want to block on it. I mean, I think
no. I don't think so. It's just information so that the reviewer feels comfortable about it. And anyway, you will when you resolve these things, then basically you need to reply to his comments, right? And this will save us a lot of email communication going on, because there are lots of issues now, and we have some resolved things, and maybe this is an preview of this is what we are going to do, and you can get engaged, or you can wait until we resolve everything.
Yeah, so I have done a couple of reviews on documents where people have added me as a reviewer to the PR that is supposed to resolve that issue, and then I can give feedback on the GitHub, or I can just reply to the email saying, yeah, it looks good. And I thought that was really useful, especially for long and sort of documents with a lot of issues.
So
that could be a thing.
Is RJ Sparks on GitHub? So I mean, we could even say, hey, if you'd like, we can add you to the PRs that will fix these issues.
That would be great. I mean, also going forward, when you will have this sort of IETF review or IHG review, we can follow the same procedure. Basically, this problem here is sometimes we have some reviewers, and I don't use GitHub, and then basically that's a different thing. But if we have a reviewer on the GitHub, I mean, that's a very good way of engaging them.
Does the workflow on GitHub block progress of a PR if a reviewer hasn't checked it off? Or no? Okay, so it's advisory.
No, it was basically I have the choice, either comment as a reviewer, either comment on a PR or just reply to the email.
Yeah,
great. That sounds like once again, useful tool.
Definitely. Okay, and I'm just gonna reply to one of these emails and basically say for both the reviews, here's what we've done. Right? Okay.
Yeah. Scheduling.
Yeah, so we have a doodle which a lot of people had filled out, and I'm just going to link it again. It still says that Wednesday, the 2nd of the month, works for everybody who filled out the doodle. A couple of people are not here today, but I would maybe default to scheduling next interim for the actual 2nd Wednesday of the month, which is October 13th. And see if people indeed show up.
Check your calendars, folks. Anybody got a problem with that?
There's an
Wanna follow up?
IESG retreat at that time in that week. I don't have details on when exactly.
Yeah,
Do you know
right.
what time zone it is?
It'd be in the morning, I think, because
I don't know where
I
you
mean,
are
you know,
located, Martin.
half
so I don't know
Europeans,
what your
half
morning
Americans. I'm sorry. It'd be in like afternoon UTC because it's
Okay.
a mix of Americans and Europeans. So like anything else
Yep.
at IETF, it's happens.
So like
in that
this time slot, something like that.
Yeah,
Conflict.
And there you have 18 to 21. We have a workshop, IAB, IHG, LLC.
Oh, that works.
Oh, so the week
Yeah.
after we also have something that conflicts.
But I don't need to be in the interim.
Yeah, that's later in the day, I think, as well. Isn't it?
Yeah, with the ITIF meeting in November, I'm loath to slip it too far into October because then it starts to step on other people's stuff. So, does anybody else have a conflict other than Zayed on the 13th?
Well, so again, the 13th is the retreat, and so I have a conflict as well.
Oh, you're still an AD? I can't keep track of these things, Martin.
And Mira as well, for that matter.
Oh, and
yeah.
Maria as well.
Yeah. And Tommy. Oh, no, not Tommy.
No,
Is it an IB? Is it a
IB.
joint retreat?
No.
No, the
Yes.
IAB thing following
Oh,
week.
wait, was it?
But on 13, is it IAB, IHG? I think 13 in the only IHG.
It was
no.
going to be joint when we were going to do it in person, so I'm not sure what happened with that.
The
And actually,
joint one,
Collins
the
related
joint
the
one is
IC
week
retreat as
after.
well. I would not do it the 13th. It seems like there's a lot of possible conflicts.
The following week is the IB retreat? The IB workshop?
The joint IAB IESG
Well,
LLC
yes.
thing is the following week. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that's later in the day. I think that's at like 7 p.m. UK.
Oh, wait a minute. Okay, I calendar off. That's the problem.
So that's on the 20th?
And so that's at right. So that week is the workshop, but it is it starts at what is that? 6 or 1800 UTC. So if we did it at the normal time, it wouldn't conflict.
We are
Yeah.
1500 UTs.
That's a long day, though. I mean,
No, I'm sorry. 1800 UTC. It's definitely after. I got maybe my UTC thing is wrong. It's 11 Pacific, and this meeting's at 8 Pacific. So it's definitely
on that week, on the workshop week, I think the workshop is until 21st of October. So 22nd of October, that's a Wednesday. Or no, I'm wrong.
22nd
No,
is
it's
Friday.
Wednesday is
No,
20th
that's a Friday.
October. Yeah.
Friday. Okay. I'm
So if
looking
we
at the
did it
wrong-
on the 20th at the normal time, it will not conflict with the workshop. If we do it on the 22nd, there's no other IETF stuff that day.
Yeah,
And
but
that's
Brian, you're
It's
muted.
blocked. I can't hear what he's saying, but he's saying he's blocked on the 22nd.
On the
Yeah.
20th, I'm also blocked.
So I propose the 20th at the usual time.
If you think we don't have all the iStar folks who would be invited to this thing on the call, but if those who are willing to have a long day, I mean, if it's a a full day's workshop and we're adding a 2-hour working group meeting on the front, that's
It's a 2-hour workshop.
There's also the
it's a 2-hour
IAB,
workshop.
There's also the IAB call immediately before this one. So it would be the IAB call followed by 2 hours of this, followed by a gap, followed by a 2-hour workshop.
It turns out the IAB call is an hour long, not a half-hour long, as it somehow ended up in my calendar. Sorry for showing up late.
So that affects Mira and Tommy, I think.
And
So do you go to IAB, Colin?
yes, I do. Yeah.
No.
So I think the 20th is at least feasible, and maybe we add in open bar, just to soften the blow.
I won't be there on the 20th then, but if most folks can do it.
I think it's either that or we cancel until December, because I don't want to try to do one in November with the IETF unless people feel strongly otherwise. And so we're gonna then So
you think October 27 is too late?
Is the IETF? The IETF is the week
I
of the
think the
7th.
IETF is 2 weeks after that.
Yeah, no, I'd prefer to do it the 20th to the 27th.
What
I'd
about the
like to go
18th? Is that's bad for people? I mean, the only conflict I know of is a 2-hour workshop meeting.
Monday was kind of bad in a doodle,
Yeah.
actually.
I tend to have a lot of meetings on Mondays, but it varies.
Wednesday was clearly the
I have
best.
the one technical thing they still let me do at Google is Mondays from 5 to 7. So.
All right, Mondays from 5 to 7 it is.
Tuesday?
We want to help you with your transition, Brian, to full pointy head.
My transition back to being an IC, yes.
Yeah, so we had
Okay,
Wednesday and then Friday, but
other than,
the others
well,
didn't.
if we do Friday, then we lose Philip and Brian. If we do Wednesday, I think we lose Philip. Is there anybody else who's blocked on the 22nd in this slot?
20th, you mean?
Oh, I'm sorry,
On
I'm looking at
Friday?
September again. Yeah, the 20th. Let's do that. It's never perfect. I think that maybe after the holidays in January, we revisit scheduling again, make sure that this works for folk. If there's a lot of iStar things that fall on Wednesdays, maybe Wednesdays isn't a good sustaining thing.
I don't think there's a lot. There's the IAB call on Wednesdays, but there's the IASG call on Thursdays. So I'm not sure it's much of a win.
Brian, are you blocked all day on Friday?
Yeah, I don't work Fridays. I have kids.
Oh, you have kids. All right.
So, like,
All right.
I mean,
Mondays
I
are
can show up to a TAPS meeting with the kids, but that's not likely to be super
entertaining. I don't know.
It'll be super entertaining, and it'll be 150% entertaining. I'm not sure how productive it'll be.
All right. Any objections to compromise for Wednesday, October 20th, usual time? Sorry, Philip. Is it a standing conflict for you on Wednesdays?
No, it's just that week.
Okay. All right. All right, we're over time.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Nice seeing
Thanks,
your faces
everybody.
again. I love
Thank
seeing
you
humans.
for all your contributions.
Reminder.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Oh,
One other point of
Okay.
business. Did we like Meet Echo?
Oh, I did.
Yes.
Should we do Meet Echo again for the next interim?
Yeah.
Can't think of a reason not to.
Perfect.
Yes.
Awesome.
Any dissent? I see no shaking heads.
All of the people who would dissent couldn't connect to Meet Echo,
Yeah.
so
There we go. Problem solved.
verify on the list. But I think this worked out really, really well.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everybody.
Cool. Ciao.
Bye.